Good morning, Story Church family. Today we're continuing our series on experiencing God with two very special guest speakers from an organization that some of you might have heard of. Compassion International has been in the kingdom business of lifting children all across the world out of poverty for the last 70 years through sponsorship opportunities and medical care and child development programs in over 29 countries. Today, you're going to be learning about Compassion's work and why spreading the hope of Jesus with our most vulnerable generations is so crucial. And here to tell us more is Rob Kelly, who is a member of Compassion's community engagement team, and Owen Githanga, a Kenyan man who grew up under the care of Compassion International. Owen is here to share part of his testimony with us today, and I'm sure it's going to be a blessing. So please help me welcome to the stage now Rob Kelly and Owen Githanga to the Story Church.
Just to be clear, I'm Rob Kelly. Really good to be here. Many years being a pastor, and I can't help myself just sort of mingling around the crowd. So I've gotten to talk to some of you, meet you a little bit, and it's been great to get to know you. I was at a church not too long ago speaking, and I found myself mingling around the crowd, but they had this one door, and whoever was the greeter there didn't show up, and I saw the things there, and so someone walked in, they thought I was the greeter. And so I just picked up the things and handed it to him, and then more people came in, so I just became the greeter for that service. And you should see the many people that were surprised when the greeter ended up being on stage speaking to them that morning. So love the local church. I did a little bit of recon on you guys, research, say what is this church really all about? And I discovered many things. One of the things I discovered was your stated mission, and it's to inspire non-religious people to follow Jesus by pursuing truth, challenging comfort, and inspiring deeper conversations. We have one simple goal: to point people toward our Savior. And man, I love that. I mean, that would be a heck of a tattoo or maybe a bumper sticker if you have a big bumper. But I read that, and then I kind of looked into what you guys have been through. What was your story? And listened to messages and saw some of the different videos and things like that. And the thing that was striking to me was, yes, those are words, and yes, those are some things that you're striving for, but that you guys are really striving for that. You want that to be the thing that you are about, your focus, and it came through. And for someone who's kind of on the outside looking in, I just want you to know how compelling that was to me and is to me, how encouraging that is to me from someone who is in a lot of churches over the course of a year. And then I also saw a couple places where you guys stated that we don't take ourselves very seriously, but we do the gospel. And I get that so much. My wife and I, we've been married 40 years. And so much so that when you go to weddings, we're like, and they have those dances at the reception, and they start weeding couples out based on how long they've been married. We've come so close to winning the last few years, but there's still some old people there that have been married longer than us. So I start looking for them before the wedding even starts, and like, how do I take them out before they even make it to the dance floor so that I can win? But you get a few years on you, and people are like, okay, what's the secret? What's the secret to being married happily so long? And I think our initial response often disappoints people because we say something much like you guys say, we don't take ourselves very seriously, but we take the gospel very seriously. And that's kind of our lead into the difference that it makes. I think it's healthy for us as a marriage. I think it's been healthy for you guys as a church. I'm a father of 3 daughters, 4 grandchildren, planted a church in Colorado. I was pastor there for 29 years, and then 10 years ago, I was asked and joined Compassion. And it's been an incredible journey. I deeply love the local church. I fell in love with Compassion, seeing how effectively it's advancing the gospel toward those that most need help, that are living in poverty. In over a handful of years, we had a church really not too dissimilar, probably in size of you guys, but we sponsored over 1,000 children through Compassion. It became kind of centric to what we did globally because it allowed everyone in my church, whether it's a 5-year-old or an 85-year-old, deep spiritual roots, new in their faith, whatever, it allowed them to connect globally in a personal way. It made it really accessible. It's almost like we brought the globe to the front door, and I love how that works. And so I know in a couple of weeks, rumor has it that I turned 60 years old, in case you're wondering, how old is this guy? I turned 60, and I've been reflecting on these different seasons of life, and really it's been encouraging. really encouraging. It's created greater gratitude in me. I'm grateful for my journey. I'm an adopted kid, so that's part of my story. And I really, really love that. And again, I love the different roles that I've played in a different way. But I was thinking of different aspects of my life, and Compassion International is a big part of my journey. And there was this time where we had sponsored a bunch of kids. I had sponsored some children. First child I ever sponsored, his name was Isaias in Bolivia. And we did a trip, and I got to go see Isaias, and we were going to meet each other. We had a sponsor day, and we were at the hotel, and Isaias was coming, and we'd written letters and sent pictures and got to know each other a little bit. And so I'm there, and I go to the lobby, and he's sitting there, and he's crying. And I'm like, he's so happy to see me. Look at how he's crying. No, the dude is like this total nerd. I say that affectionately, but the reason he was crying, because up to that point in his life, I think he was 12 at the time, up to that point in life, he'd never missed a day of school. And so because he was going to go hang out with me for a day, he was missing a day of school, and it was breaking his heart. And so, right, a nerd, right? And so anyway, I took him, and I loved him, and I hugged him, told him I loved him. I gave him his birthday gift, told him how proud I was of him, and I said, man, you do not need to hang out with me today. You should go to school. And he's like, yes. And so he was off and going to school. Not the first time people have chosen school as better than hanging out with me, but that kind of story of my life. But we actually got to hang out on Saturday. So that Saturday he comes and we hung out, and we're sitting in the back of the bus. This is the first ever question that my sponsored kid in person asks me after all these letters, after all this stuff. He sits down and he says, so the United States of America is a republic. What's the difference between a republic and a democracy? That is the first question my sponsored kid ever gave me. Like, I'm ready for these deep, beautiful conversations, but not that, right? And so, but it was awesome. And here's the thing. I got to know him, and we connected at that level, and just seeing how intellectual he was and what he was striving for. And it was a beautiful relationship, and I could share stories with all the kids I sponsor, and it's really great. But there are these different seasons in life. In the Bible, it tells us that, right? Ecclesiastes zeroes in on that. Ecclesiastes, if you're getting bummed out, probably don't read that book, because it'll bum you out more, right, in some regard. But there's this part, it kind of starts out pretty heavy, but then it gets to chapter 3, and the author just says this. Kind of talks about how God is mixing all these ingredients in life together, right? And it really helps us understand there's a reason for every season in our life. And so here's what it says. I know this will be familiar with some of you, but there's a time for everything. A season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search, a time to give up, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to mend, a time to be silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war, a time for peace. And if you've been keeping track, there's 14 what we think are kind of positive things, 14 negative things. And that has always been kind of the thing that draws me back to God's Word. Because the Bible doesn't present this idea like, hey, if you just do a couple things here, life's going to be magical. It's going to be this 24/7, 365 masterpiece that's just going to be spectacular. No, the Bible's like, you know what? Life is going to be really hard and confusing and disappointing and frustrating at times. But yet you can have contentment and joy even in the midst of that. And I love that. And I love the perspective I've gained, honestly, just by becoming older. I think more than ever I understand the different seasons, and that maybe even those seasons where there's heartache and pain, just how important that they really are, that they're not random. I believe it's part of God's design that prepares us and that shapes us and points us to something much greater. And I say that very cautiously because some seasons seem really pointless and they seem very cruel almost, and so I don't ever want to minimize that. But I think it's good news that even those seasons are not some disconnected events from the rest of life. It's all part of this tapestry that God's weaving together, joy and sorrows and everything in between, to create His greater story that we get to be part of it. And the thing that I've been thinking pretty deeply about the last several weeks is, what holds that all together? These different seasons, good ones, bad ones, hard ones, navigating change, all that. What is the thing that allows us to navigate that, to have some aim, to to have some purpose in all of that. And the primary thing that I keep coming back to is that it's hope. That it's hope. Not, when I say hope, I don't mean just some wish, but kind of the biblical definition where it links hope with faith. Hebrews writer says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. See, hope is this life-shaping certainty of something that is going to happen, even though it hasn't happened yet. And it's not our circumstances that truly affect the way we live, but it's our believed in future. And that's kind of hard to get our minds around, but if I can illustrate it maybe this way, you think of maybe being in a battle. You're in this colossal battle and you're wounded and you don't have the strength to raise up your sword anymore. And the enemy is closing in. It looks like the end is there. But then all of a sudden you hear it. The drums in the distance of your army. The footsteps of your army that's coming, that's just over the hill. Now, nothing in your circumstances have changed. You're still losing. The enemy is still there. Your reinforcements are coming, but they're not there yet. But just knowing that, all of a sudden, everything changes. Your heart becomes braver. Somehow your arm becomes stronger and you once again can lift the sword. See, that's hope. Knowing what's coming changes how you fight now. Knowing what's coming should change how you live now. See, it's not the circumstances that make us really feel the way we feel. It's not circumstances that actually affect the way we live. It's our believed in future that completely determines how you process and how you respond to what's going on now, good, ugly, bad, whatever the case may be. It's kind of how our brains work. It's a vast oversimplification on my part, but all this study, especially the last 15 years in neurobiology, it gives proof that generally speaking, our brains are either operating out of fear or out of hope. And fear, of course, triggers things. Hope triggers things. Fear heightens alertness, which is a good thing, which is super important. However, fear also limits our perspective. It increases our anxiety. It gets in the way of making good, healthy, smart decisions. Whereas hope, it activates our brain in such a way that it boosts motivation. It creates positive emotion in us. It allows us to be more resilient. It enhances our focus. It helps us be able to solve problems much, much, much better. Hope orients us toward a believed in future, making challenges feel manageable, and it encourages our persistence, which we so need as we navigate life. So in short, hope is what fuels optimism and what I would call maybe proactive behavior each and every day. And without hope in God's promises, I think life can seem meaningless. And it can certainly seem fleeting. And here's the thing about hope. Hope is not meant to just dwell in us. Hope is meant to flow through us. And I used a lot of words, but that's where I'm going. My challenge to you, my encouragement today is be someone who hope flows through. Be a conduit of hope. And specifically, I'm going to challenge you, be a conduit of hope to a child in poverty that desperately needs that. Right? The Apostle Paul says that God comforts us, and the same comfort he comforts us with, that can flow through us, and we use that same comfort to comfort others. Romans says that God fills us with hope and joy and peace, so much so through the Holy Spirit, it can overflow out of us into the lives of others. And throughout the New Testament, we're encouraged to spur each other on, to encourage each other toward good deeds, right? Toward love. And that creates channels for hope to pass through. I was running one day, and I was training for a marathon. I had a long run to do. I was running like 17 miles that day. I got started late. I was just going to run 20 laps around this lake that's 0.85 miles long so I could be really close to a source of water. That was my choice. So I'm running there. I am on lap 20, and there's this woman that's running, doing the best she can, who is much larger than me, and she's just kind of running. And it was just in my mind, I just put my hand up, and I gave her a high five when she went by. And she says, "Thanks, sweetie." And so I'm like, well, I got to do an extra lap because I want to see if she might need medical care. I don't know. And so I'm running around, and there she is again, and I give her another high five, and she's going. And now I'm exhausted because I was running pretty fast. But I've got to do another lap now because this woman will not stop running. And so I'm running around, and so I do 5 more laps, high-fiving her, right, each time. She gets in 2 laps. Finally, she stops, all right? So I stop. I'm like, am I going to have to call an ambulance, medical care? Because she's weeping on the side of sitting on a chair. And she said, I've never run one full lap without stopping around this lake, and today I ran 2. And it was such a reminder to me. You know what I chose to do that day? I chose just to be present in her life. There's no coaching plan. You know what my strategy was? My strategy was to give her a high five. And yet there was something in that by just being present that changed everything. When I think about my link with compassion and when something clicked inside of me that said, no longer am I not going to double down and do everything I can to bring hope to children that are living in poverty. It was on that same trip when I was visiting Isaias. We go to this home in Bolivia, and it's this little home that's poverty. There's nothing. If you've seen poverty, you know there's nothing around. They don't have anything. It's a family of 5, 3 little kids, a mom and a dad. And the mom puts this little girl in my arms, and this beautiful little baby girl. And we're talking, and I finally say, hey, what's this little girl's name, and how old is she? And the mom looks at me, and she says, she's 4 weeks old, and her name is Clara. And tears just start rolling down my face, and I don't dare look at my wife, who is close by, because it'll be the blubber ugly cry if that starts to happen, right? Because 4 weeks before that trip, our first grandchild was born, a little girl, and they named her Clara. And you know how you can have like 1,000 things go through your mind at the same time? And I can think in that moment, there's 2 little girls born to these parents who live in different communities in different parts of the world. And even though they have the same name and born on almost the exact same day, even though they have that, the probable trajectory of their lives is completely different because of where they live. And at least for me, in a personal, said, I don't want it to be that way anymore. I need to do whatever I can to change the trajectory of the lives for little girls like Clara. I had no idea at that time that I ended up working with compassion. But that's what I do. And I tell that story because my hope is that maybe, it won't be maybe that profound this morning, but after you hear Owen share, you'd say, you know what? This morning is where, in a very practical, tangible way, I extend hope. I become a conduit of hope to others, specifically children around the world that are living in poverty, simply by choosing to sponsor a child, right? And you can do, again, it's not just a over there around the world kind of thing. It's the kind of thing that you can do across the street to your neighbors, to people within this church, to people in this community. Be a conduit of hope. But I want to challenge you specifically that you would consider providing hope to a child that needs hope. Because of all the things that poverty does, the number one thing that it does is it destroys hope in the life of an individual, in this case, a life of a child. And maybe you would be like people in my church. I think so often when we were thinking of what do we want to do globally, so many of my people, they kind of got it, and they can maybe frame it up theologically, maybe not, but they say, we really should help the vulnerable. We really should do something. We're in a position, we should just do something. It's not a requirement. But their question is always like, well, how do we do it and who do we trust? And for us, the answer became compassion. Did all kinds of vetting on them, saw the integrity, saw how the dollars were used, saw the impact that was being made now in 29 countries around the world, 2.3 million children. It's like, okay, that's a place we can trust. There's almost 75 years of integrity there. But then how can you do it? You can do it by simply sponsoring a child. You can get a packet, you can scan the QR code, you can fill it out and just sponsor a child and begin that relationship where maybe someday you'll have someone who'll say, hey, what's the difference between a republic and a democracy? And in the midst of all that, you can share stories about Jesus. And here's the thing. We talk about Compassion's mission is to release children from poverty in Jesus' name. And honestly, I don't think it's that far away from what your stated mission is. I think it's very similar. But the thing that sometimes gets lost in all of this is even though you're releasing a child from poverty in Jesus' name, by sponsoring a kid, man, I would bet everything I had that the person that benefits most from that and is released from maybe some things that are locking you down is the person that sponsors. And so I could tell you, man, I could stand up here and go on about stories, and I can tell you exactly how compassion works and all of that. But rather than me doing that, I just want you to hear it firsthand. I want you to hear it from Owen, who was a sponsored kid. His story is remarkable. And I want you to hear him kind of unpack how it made a difference in his life when he was sponsored. And then my hope is that afterwards today, after communion, after closing things out, that you'd go out and you would choose to sponsor a child. Because the person you're going to see, Owen, was a kid on a packet one day. And look what God did in his life. Welcome Owen to the stage. Thanks.
Good morning, church. So my name is Owen Gitanga, and I was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. I live in Colorado Springs right now. And ever since I was a little boy, I had this big dream, and it wasn't to become a doctor or a pilot or a lawyer, but this big dream was to one day become an accountant. I know. But then I realized that that would be nearly impossible because of where I was born. And, you know, my mom was a sole breadwinner, and it was me and my two brothers. And she would make about $5 to $10 a month. And I mean, $5 to $10 a month to be able to support 3 kids, that was impossible. And so life for me, if there was a word, it was survival. I woke up in the morning and I had no idea when the next plate of food would come from. And sometimes it went for days without having food to eat. And if you've ever gone for more than a day without food, you become desperate. You would do absolutely anything just to get food in your stomach. And that's what pushed me to going and knocking on people's doors, begging for food. And that wasn't a very good experience because, you know, these people saw my face over and over again. And so when I knocked on their door one more time and they opened and saw my face, a lot of times they shut the door in my face. And, you know, sometimes when they let me in, they humiliated me. And they knew I wouldn't just walk away because I needed the food to be able to survive. I grew up in a house with no fridge, no electricity, no taps, no running water. And the only source of water that we had came from this river. And, you know, this river originated in a slaughterhouse. So by the time it ended by where we lived, the color of the water was brownish, greenish. And we had to go take, you know, containers and bring the water home and boil it and use it as drinking water. And brown water doesn't taste good. It doesn't matter how many times you boil it. And so from drinking the dirty water, I was often very sick as a little boy. I grew up in a community where some parents were afraid to name their kids because the infant mortality rate was really high. A lot of kids did not live to see 5 years old. And so one of the things my mom told me when I was, you know, told us when we were little is she didn't have the money to take us to the hospital. Back in those days, if you didn't have money or insurance, they would not take you in. So she told us that every time we get sick, to go to bed and hopefully wake up in the morning feeling better. And that was hard. And she shared with me this story that when I was 1 year old, I came down with measles, and there was a huge measles outbreak in Kenya that ended up taking the lives of so many babies. And she told me that night she couldn't take me to a hospital. So she held me and hoped that I was going to be fine. But she told me that by the middle of the night when she looked at me, I was pale and weak, and she didn't think I would make it to the morning. But by the grace of God, I survived, just like so many other times in my life. And I mean, poverty is bad. But for me, the absolute worst thing about poverty is the hopelessness that comes from poverty. It's not knowing that you'll go without food for one day, but you will struggle to get one plate of food a day for the rest of your life. It's when people used to look at me straight in the eyes and tell me that I am worth less. And, you know, when they ask me this question that people have to ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? I responded with a smile in my face that I want to become an accountant. But it's what they told me that really crushed the little hopes that I still had, because they told me, don't waste your time dreaming, because none of your dreams will ever come true. Words that really, they hurt, but they crushed my hopes. And so I thought this is how my life was going to be, that I was born poor, I was going to live poor and die poor, and nobody would ever get to hear my story. I would be part of the statistics of the millions of kids trapped in poverty. And that is not how my life ended up. Because at the age of 8 years old, I met Compassion International. So Compassion only works through the local church. And so my mom heard about this church, Redeemed Gospel Church, and that they were registering kids to help them. And so she told me to go get ready, and we went through the gates of this church. Me and my mom were probably thinking we were going to get food and clean water, and that would have been amazing. But we had no idea what waited for us on the other sides of the gates. And we went in, and Compassion had to make sure that, we needed the help. And so they did home visits and realized I needed the help. And one of the first things they did is they took a picture of me, just like this little girl. And her name is actually Excited. Her name is Excited. And they printed out a packet, and my packet ended up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on a Compassion Sunday just like today. A guy walked by the table, saw my face, and said, I'm going to sponsor this kid. And that started this relationship with my sponsor, where he would write me letters. And, one of the first times I had ever heard the words, I love you, was in this letter that came to me all the way from Wisconsin. Back in those days, they didn't have digital letters, and so the letters were all handwritten. And so I remember reading this letter, I love you, and kind of blew my mind, because, I was that kid that people shut the doors on and looked at and told I was worth less. And so hearing that, and also there was this statement that he always wrote on his letters, I'm praying for you. And that took me a long time to understand what he meant by he was praying for me. And it was, when I started going to the church, and I realized, right away that there was something really different about the Compassion stuff that I didn't get out there. They were loving on me in a way I had never been loved on before. And it didn't take me long enough to connect the dots to realize that, the reason why these people were different was because they were Jesus people. And the thing about Compassion is they're passionate about Jesus. From the time I stepped foot into that church, these people would not shut up talking about Jesus. But it's in the way they loved on me. And I mean, reading the scriptures talking about this God who was mighty, and, this God who had a hope and a future for my life, things I had never had before, and I just thought, I'm going to go to the church, and I'm going to accept their Jesus, because I want to see if what they say about this Jesus is really true. And so I remember going to the church, and I said, I've come to accept your Jesus. And, I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And that was the best decision I ever made as a kid, was to accept Christ. That was the best gift that Compassion ever gave to me, the gift of Jesus Christ. Because here is the truth. If you do not hear anything from what I say today, is that poverty left my life the day Christ came into my life. That if Compassion had just given me Jesus and told me to go my way, I would have been just fine. Because when I got Jesus, I got a hope that was way more stronger than the poverty that I faced. And the more I read the Bible, is the more I knew the truth, and the truth set me free. See, poverty is a lot more spiritual and mental than it is physical. Money, while money is good, money can never get rid of poverty. But Jesus can, because Jesus works from the inside out. And Compassion didn't stop at Jesus. They gave me food and clean water, and that was a miracle. They took me to hospital. Every time I got sick, they took me to school. I was the first person in my whole family to graduate high school. And then I went on to college, and I did my bachelor's degree in, guess what? Accounting. And And I got a scholarship to go to, of all the states in America, North Dakota. I remember leaving home in December, and it was about 100 degrees, and landing in Fargo, North Dakota, on one of the coldest winters they had ever had, and it was 50 below, and I almost told them to send me back home. But I stayed and completed my master's degree and, sat for my CPA license. I'm a CPA in America. I'm an accountant. See, today I stand in front of you because someone was a conduit of hope in my life. This guy passed by the table 20-some years ago and saw my picture on a packet. I said, I'm going to sponsor this little boy. And, I think a year ago I wrote him a letter. Owen was my compassion sponsor. And I asked him, would you have thought that you picking up my packet would lead to my life being where it was? 20-some years ago, if you would have asked me if I would be standing here in front of you telling you my story about what God has done, I would have told you you're crazy. But here I am, representing Compassion's mission statement. I have been released from poverty in Jesus' name. And, I have a couple pictures that I want to show you. This guy, his name is Owen, and about 13 years ago, I got married to my beautiful wife, Crystal, and that was amazing. But I also had something awesome happen. My compassion sponsor was the best man in our wedding. And see, that picture is a picture of compassion. And the next picture there, I thought, as soon as I got out of poverty, I wanted to start sponsoring kids because I knew what it meant for me. And me and my wife would sponsor 3 kids through compassion. And I thought, hey, Owen sponsored Owen. Why doesn't Owen sponsor Owen? And that boy over there, his name is Owen from Nicaragua. And see, I might not be the best man in his wedding, but I'm here to see what God will do in his life. And the last picture there is a picture of my beautiful family, my beautiful wife, Crystal, and 3 boys, Jerome, Warren, and Ace, and our little girl, Olivia. See, when I think about my life now, I see hope. And I would never have written my story the way God rewrote my story. And I'm so glad me and my mom walked into that church. Because poverty is generational. It's often passed on from one family to the next like a trophy. But the beautiful thing is, because compassion intervened, I've been able to break the generational curse of poverty. My kids will never know poverty. Poverty stops with me. From me, we start a new generation free from poverty in Jesus' name. And, sponsoring kids with compassion has been amazing, especially for me as a parent. It's, it gives us an opportunity to sit around the table with my kids. And, we get to pray for our kids one at a time. We write them letters. And I think it's a beautiful way to be able to, plant seeds into your kids and, just tell them about important things in life. And I think you start to see seeds from your, fruits from this kind of seeds you plant. Because last year was Ace's birthday. Ace is our 3rd-born boy. And we asked him, what do you want for your birthday? And Ace said, I don't want anything. Let's buy something for Junior. Junior is one of our sponsored kids who goes to Redeemed Gospel Church, the church that I grew up in. And I don't know about you, but that really touched me as a parent to see this fruit start to grow in our kids. And to wrap this up, I got to serve for 3 years with compassion as, guess what? As an accountant. And this is the highlight of my story, is, when I accepted this position to serve as the manager of accounting for compassion, I took a pause because I knew I was going to look at their books. And this organization it has meant so much to not only me, but to 2.3 million kids. And this is a beautiful thing. And this is one of the reasons why I love to speak for Compassion. And this is a CPA speaking. I've gone through their numbers. One of the reasons I love Compassion even more is because of their financial integrity. They don't just say they help kids, but they actually do help the kids. And the numbers reflect that. And I mean, today you guys have an opportunity to sponsor a child. And I hope you take it. I hope you take it. And, you know, I'm excited because Owen sponsored me, and my whole family came to know the Lord. Owen sponsored me, and thousands of people have come to know the Lord through my story. Now, I don't know if you can imagine the impact that 2.3 million kids has on the kingdom of God. It's when you sponsor a child, you're not only helping them out of poverty, but you're taking Jesus to Judea, to Samaria, and to the ends of the world. And, you know, it's very easy. It's, you know, all of you who are technologically savvy, all you need to do is just, you know, scan the QR code in the front and fill it out. And if you don't want to do that, there's a form at the back that you can fill the front and back and give it to the people at the Compassion table. I'm excited because this day is going to be remembered when we get to heaven. And from today, not only the kids that are going to be rescued from poverty, but also the people who are going to come to know the Lord out of today. God bless you guys.